Hi, everyone, and welcome to Beyond Screens. This is the monthly Playable Theater edition of the show where we talk to people working in areas at the intersection of games and theater. And I'm really, really excited to have a team here that had their game in IndieCade last year. They go by the moniker All of Them Witches, or AOTW. And actually, we don't have all of them here, but we have some of All of Them Witches. And we're going to talk a little bit about their game Arcana, which was an IndieCade last year. And also, I think we're going to probably get into a discussion about online theater versus live theater, in-person theater, and also sort of the relationship of media, because the augmented reality / alternate reality genres that you guys are working in overlap a lot between digital games and live performance. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because this is a great example of this intersection that we're talking about. So why don't we start with you guys just introducing yourselves and just talking about your role on the team. And we can do it in the, I've learned so much from theater people, the popcorn technique, where when you're done, you just bounce it over to the next person. So I'm Celia, my pronouns are she, her. I am the co-founder of IndieCade. I'm also the co-executive director of Playable Theatre, which is a nonprofit that focuses on promoting participatory theater. I'm gonna popcorn it to Molly.
Hi, how are you? I'm Molly. She, her are my pronouns. I work with All of Them Witches. I am a producer and a creator, and this is a very hive-minded collaborative group that all kind of does a million different things. And I guess I'll throw it to, let's actually start with where it normally starts with, the script. Eva Anderson.
Hi, my name's Eva Anderson, she, her. I, along with Eric Hoff, am one of the two writers of this project, and my background personally is in television writing. Eric is a theater director and an immersive park and museum designer and creative director at Thinkwell. And so, yeah, we were part of the scripting process. And I'll popcorn it to Tommy.
Hi, I'm Tommy Haunton, he, him. I am an experienced designer specializing in game design and narrative sort of crossing over. So I do a lot of escape room type things, but also narrative live events, video games, you name it. I am part of the sort of path process. So usually I will work with the story and find ways to make it interactive. And yeah, jump over to, let's go to Natalie and Aaron.
Yes. Hi, I'm Natalie, pronouns she, her.
I'm Aaron, he, him. We are 2/3 of the group E3W Productions, which is an LA-based film and immersive theater company. Our background started in film, but we've kind of transitioned very heavily to immersive theater. And we were on the, along with our third member, Austin Keeling, we were the kind of production side of things. And so once the script was written, we kind of took that and worked with Tommy to figure out all the playable elements. And then we went to actually film and create these elements with the star of Arcana. We'll bounce it right over to Nerea Duhart.
Thank you. Hey guys, my name is Nerea Dewhart. I am an immersive actress, also a film actress. I'm based here in LA. I play Jade and Robin from Arcana. And I got to know everybody through various forms of film and immersive theater and escape rooms. And this was my first immersive experience like the one we did and the platform we did. So that was really exciting.
Great. Did we get everybody? I think to provide some context for the audience, it would be great to show the trailer. And maybe Tommy or whoever, maybe Eva's a good one to do this, is to just give us like a couple sentences of what Arcana is, just so people understand what they're looking at, and then you guys can run the trailer.
Yes, thanks. So Arcana is an ARG, horror ARG that was based online in May of 2020. And basically the concept behind it, or the onboarding, is that you just follow a stranger on Instagram. Her name is Jade. She's an artist. She's newly living alone. Something's happened and she's newly back online. and she starts talking to the audience, starts posting both just sort of her emotional posts, but also pieces of art that she's created based off nightmares that she's had. And as the audience starts to engage with her, both in the comments and in the DMs, they start to realize that there's a pattern to Jade's dreams, and that something very sinister is happening that she's not even aware of. And the game eventually, over the course of the month, started on Instagram and then branched out into multiple platforms. There were multiple characters, and the world expanded and expanded, and got more and more sinister and terrifying. And so that's Arcana.
Then I can get the trailer queued up.
Robert, this is getting too close. I can feel it. It's gonna be okay. We have what we need. We have everything we need. And I knew I was doing something bad, but I thought that I could do this cleansing ritual. And I didn't know he was buried underneath. And whatever I did woke him up. And now he's in my sister. And I need your help. He's still here. I need you to undo what I did. I need you to save my sister.
Jade? Jade, are you up here? Jade, it's Hadley. It's... Jade! Jade, are you okay?
That is so scary. Just the trailer makes me scared. Cool. All right. I think one of the things that I think is really interesting about this piece is that you explicitly call it a game. And I mean, it's obviously an ARG or an alternate reality game, but it also has a lot of theater techniques woven into it. So I'm wondering, I guess I want to start with like where the decision came from to call it a game, but also how the theatrical aspect of it is integrated into that.
Yeah, I can start with. I think the process really was where the experience came from was we originally wanted to do a remounting of the experience we had done in New Orleans for the Overlook Film Festival that brought us together, called All of Them Witches, which is where our name came from, and that was very much a alternate reality game set in real life, where real locations, all in person. COVID hit, and we were unable to do that, and so we were thinking about putting it online, but the challenge was it just was too complicated to recontextualize it. And at that point, we might as well make something new, geared specifically for online. And I think the idea was if we're just telling a story that's non-interactive, the idea of what wording, what language can clearly define that this is something that's playable, that's not just a passive reading experience, but encourages people to participate. And so coming up with a word that is that evocative and clear, game seemed the cleanest thing. It is obviously, as you said, much more than a game, but one of the big goals we had was trying to buck a lot of the styles and traditions and sort of templates that most ARGs use. And to us, the biggest thing was accessibility. Most players of ARGs know how to dive in and sort of the tropes of it. But for us, calling it a game outright, and that sort of followed along the trend of us identifying characters very clearly, having a clear set of rules and standards, days we operated. To me, that was just part of a larger transparency and accessibility sort of approach we took, which is very clearly labeling and defining the experience.
Cool. I'm going to get back to that in more detail, but I'd like to go to Eva and just have you talk a little bit about the idea, and because you're credited as the writer, and I'm curious, first of all, what the process of it was, if it was a devising process, if you worked together, or if you just went off in like a cabin and wrote it or whatever. Like, how did the actual story get created?
It was definitely extremely collaborative. We would have these long conversations, and actually, because all of this was put together we started having this conversation, I think, week 2 of quarantine and lockdown. So we would all get on Zoom and start talking about ideas. And I think one of the threads that was like when we decided this was we had to write something for online platforms and come up with it from scratch. There are a couple things that were little inspirations, and one of them is just the idea of following someone on Instagram that you don't know that well, who's having a really tough time and just sort of lurking. And I felt like a lot of I definitely was doing that a lot because I was completely isolated and bored. And so it felt like a human experience a lot of people could identify with, creeping on a stranger's Instagram. There's also our previous show in New Orleans, All of Them, which is the show, wove in some true crime, some local history, and some kind of deep like witchcraft and like the studies of different sorts of spirituality. And so because we felt like we operated very successfully in those worlds, we also wanted to weave in those processes as well, so, or those concepts as well. So we came up with the character of Jade. Then we came up with a true crime story that was an LA crime story that we were going to weave through the experience as well. And then we also came up with the idea that this was a ghost story. There's not a ghost story, but a demon possession story. And so, the types of demons throughout in different religions around the world also became part of it. And so so once we got the story rolling, the idea would be Eric and I would come up with a kind of a vague storyline for the week. It would go to E3W and Tommy, and they would come up with concrete ways that they could make puzzles with the things they had and the art that they could create. And then we would go back to the scripting process to be like, okay, but so how does we make that make sense? How does that make sense for the character? So it was actually this very circular way that we wrote the story where everybody got their hands on it. Molly as well, Nerea as well. Like, we were all feeding the beast and then trying to make it into something that made logical sense and made emotional sense.
And Eva, do you come from a game design background, or a theater or television, or what is your actual writing experience prior to this?
I'm a television writer professionally. For like immersive heads, I wrote on the Jason Siegel's Jejun Institute show, Dispatches from Elsewhere, but I am also an immersive theater creator.
That's super helpful. One of the things that I really liked about the piece, I've written some rants on the Playable Theatre blog about the Zoom as the new proscenium and how much I hate it. And in game design, we have the term diegetic, which is also used in a slightly different way in theater, but it basically means that what's happening on the screen is inside of the game world. And I really like the diegetics of Instagram as the starting point for this. Can you guys talk a little bit more about that? Because I think that conceit, like before you even start telling the story, is really, really strong.
Hi, I'll jump in. I think that was one of the really surprising and really amazing things that at least on our end, we were not anticipating from launching this project is that by starting it on Instagram, it's something that everyone knows. Everyone knows what it is. Everyone does it every day. And so we introduced this character, Jade, who Nerea just played so naturally, so beautifully, so likably that immediately you scroll to her post, you see her post, and it felt real. It felt like you were finding this new person online. And by getting to know her and getting to follow her, you started to fall in love with her. And so I think that it was amazing how quickly we were able to diegetically to get the players invested in the story, which made it really exciting later on when we started opening the world outside of Instagram into kind of more different websites, different mediums, to kind of really make it feel like it was going beyond even the real world feeling of Instagram and bleeding out into all different avenues of the world as well.
Yeah, and for accessibility,
so
again, sorry. For accessibility, it was also a big deal because Instagram is a public platform. People use it. So being able to seamlessly integrate with something people use just made it easier for people who, again, had never done an ARG before or had never followed something. The goal was to create multiple layers of interaction. The most simple is you don't have to solve a single thing to follow the story. If you want to just lurk and watch video and see the progression of Jade's character without even engaging with the character, you can get the full complete story. But if you start solving and diving in and communicating, you'll get more, sort of rich interactions back. But the goal was the accessibility of the platform was so easy to use. People are familiar with it. And again, the common thread is that you don't have to do a single thing to get the full story.
So this is a good segue into one of the questions I wanted to talk to you and kind of do a little bit of a deep dive into, because my particular obsession is agency. Like, what kind of agency do we give players and participants? And right up front, you use the word playable, which I think is really great. And so I'd love to just talk a little bit in more detail about what that means to you broadly, from a sort of an aesthetic perspective, but also like some specifics of what kinds of play the audience was able to do within the piece.
I feel like Tommy and Eva should definitely speak on this, because I feel like this is kind of a little bit more. I know one of the things that we've experienced because of the game that we did in New Orleans is that game, part of the conceit was that you didn't know it was a game, you didn't know what was real, and you didn't know that it wasn't. And so we really wanted to make sure that people knew that this was a game, especially in times of COVID when people were already stressed and anxious enough, and we were making a horror game that was just going to appear in front of them. We wanted to make sure that we were very clear about that. But also, and I know this is something Tommy already spoke to, but wanting to make sure that it was accessible to all, because a lot of times these games as much as we want to feed a hardcore group that can solve puzzles and can do that, but to make sure that everybody was actually able to play. And so again, this is all because of this amazing team and Nerea, who did such a great job at just being so likable. And you could just watch this, but it is playable in terms of a human interaction. I think it's also very important that all of our stories kind of have a social message or issue, and this is really about being connective with one another. And so I think it was really important that they actually felt like they got to connect with Jade, which meant all of us were furiously on the back end of the Instagram account, trying to keep up with messages, trying to take turns, like, I gotta go to the bathroom, somebody pick this up, okay, go. And so it was a lot of that on the background, but actually being able to communicate genuinely. There was a real person, there was not a bot, there was nothing else, I think was a really important thing that was very much needed during that time. So I think being aware of what you're making and when you're making it, and what the purpose of that, it was very important for us, and also became very fun as well. It became getting to, as they're getting to know your game, but you're also getting to know your players. You're getting to know these people. You're getting to interact with them and hopefully give them something that can actually brighten their day, and especially in a time when there wasn't a lot of hope around and there was a lot of confusion. And that was also why it was so important for us, you speak of agency, to give them agency over the ending of it. There was 2 complete endings. We released the second one afterwards. It was not picked by us. They actually got to decide what happened to Jade in a time when we had no idea what was going to happen the next minute. This was something that you actually got to come together and decide as a group, and then would see that result immediately. And we just felt that that was so important for not only the content, but the delivering to the audiences what we felt like we really needed ourselves. And in those weeks of creation, talking about what do we need as a team of artists right now? We need to feel connected to one another. We need to come together, and we need to feel like we have some agency in our lives. And we couldn't have that in our lives, so we did it in a game.
So specifically, can you give some examples of the types of agency and play mechanics that the audience / players were able to do during the game?
Yeah, it was primarily communication. So any Instagram post that came out, we made it very clear with communication what was solvable and what was a task that you needed to do and what was just flavor and world building. So the idea was that you could solve something and you could communicate that to Jade over Instagram as the first sort of step of agency. And so you would get a response back. And so we had to build up sort of a language for Jade. And since Nerea established the character so strongly, there was a very clear voice for the character. And we had a progression of sort of character motivations, what the character was going through each day, so that when, the staff of all of us, essentially, I think at any point, all of us, including Nerea, got to beat Jade over Instagram, we basically would have a channel where we would keep track of what her mood was that day. And then obviously the history of the chat made it easy to keep track at a glance of sort of how, that particular player was engaging. Were they being more of a dick? Were they being nice? Were they being supportive? And so we were able to pick that up very quickly and respond. When players solved, and actually got a puzzle right, then the solution would trigger Jade and would yield an answer that either was, frustration, shock, embarrassment, whatever it was. And we would work on a group as what that answer was. And so the idea was even you might be talking to a different person every single day, we wanted there to be a continuity so it felt like Jade's voice was consistent. And as the weeks progressed, then different accounts would open and people were able to dig into other things. And every character you met, more or less, you could interact with over email or over Instagram. And so the idea was, again, making that consistent across all the platforms, the character's voice and the progression of what emotional feelings they had that day over what was happening event-wise. And then lastly, the major solve was when players were able to help Jade at the end, they got to choose whether to essentially there's an old demonic spirit that is inside of Jade, and the two solutions are you can either save her but release the spirit to go essentially possess someone else in the world, or you could bind it to Jade, essentially trapping it in her forever but also cursing her and dooming her. So we didn't know what people were going to pick, and so both endings were shot, and it was really about players submitting a video doing the ritual, which was basically the way of their voting. They could vote to bind it to Jade or to free it from Jade, and those rituals were essentially their vote. So even though we had a lot of players, we wanted to make sure that if you were voting and had a stake in things, you had to submit a video to us to make sure that that was your way of being actively participating. It couldn't just be a troll account saying, oh, bind it to her. It was really, if you wanted to bind it to her, you had to send us a video indicating that. And some people were tricky. Some people tried to do rituals that had both things in there, and those did not count. They had to do one or the other for a vote to count.
Wow. How long was the ritual that the audience did?
It was pretty quick.
15 seconds. I was about to say also, certain people on this team lent themselves to certain voices. I actually loved being Gareth. I feel like Eva kind of was very Jade, but also I remember when she turned into Demon Jade, and I think Aaron, you were having a day and you're like, give me the demon.
That was
yeah.
Just kind of like bouncing off of what everyone said, I think that was really great was that there was this overarching game that is something you can go back to the Instagram account and play through it. That's a game that exists. It kind of, it had a plan, like a blueprint that it followed, but there was this kind of secret game that every player was playing with the communication that was totally specific to them. And so it was like you were playing two games at once. You were playing this solving puzzles game, but also building a relationship.
Here's a question. How did you do that with 7,000 players?
Again, it was kind of,
we tapped out at 2, not 7.
Yeah, it was 2,000, but it was definitely
2,000. Oh, sorry. Okay.
How much people wanted to put in, and that was what was amazing was to really. It was a moment of like, if you put a lot in, you're going to get a lot out. If someone just sent the answer to to the puzzle or whatever, you know, Jade would have a response, and if they didn't really kind of carry that anywhere further, kind of sometimes that's where it ended. But then there were people who really tried to push buttons, and you know, and then it manifested, like Molly said. Eventually, Demon Jade took over the Instagram, and it was amazing to see how many people were trying to help and were trying to say, "Get out of my friend, get out of my friend," and then how many people were like, "Stay, this is great. You know, mess some stuff up," and it was just really amazing to see how, you know, kind of followed the lead of the players. You know, they told us what they wanted to get out of this, and we kind of went with them. It was really great.
So,
I think it's
yeah, go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that was really special, was that it's sort of one-to-one, because I think that's one of the things people miss the most about in-person interactive experiences is the chance to have that sense of agency with, you can say whatever you want. And in this, it didn't matter. Like, the only thing is we asked people who played to respect, you know, a level of conduct, and like, don't be a dick, basically, was our level of conduct. Like, it's pretty self-explanatory, and thankfully no one really overstepped that line. Some people sent something, you know, weird, and they would get a warning, you know, in world and then an out of world warning, and then if they ever did anything, then we could block them. But no one ever rose to that major level of needing to be blocked. But I think that was so special. Like, I've worked on ARGs that, you know, are more traditional from corporate clients that are, you know, millions of players, but those are very, very standard in, here's a puzzle, put the answer into a website, and maybe you'll talk to a chatbot. And to me, those are fine, like those sell a product. But for this, we didn't want to sell a product. We were building a world and trying to make a character that people cared about. And so we thought this was going to be maybe 100 players max. Like, we thought it was going to be super small, which we were okay with. We wanted people to build relationships. So as it grew, we got nervous, because we're like, we really hope it doesn't blow up to this level, because we still want to keep this organic nature of people feeling like they have relationships with the characters.
So this is a really good segue to one of the questions I had, and I'm kind of going to redirect a little bit of the attention to Nerea for this, or Nerea, sorry. A thing that I've really noticed a lot, and that I've been thinking a lot about, is what it means to be acting in an interactive show. Because acting, you know, historically, you get a script, you memorize the script, and then you do the show. And there are variations in your style or whatever, and you respond to the audience, but the stuff you're saying never changes, right? And I've noticed that there are a lot of different challenges that actors face in this kind of context. And what you guys did, and I think the mediation helped with this, is that you sort of did a kind of collective acting almost, where more than one person, you basically separated the different functions of that one character. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and from you, Nerea, particularly, like, what was it like to be a character that might change or might respond differently to the audience reaction, and also where you were not the only person, right, portraying the character. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about the traditional way of let's say film or theater. All right, and also the audience that comes to it. When you go to a cinema, you're sitting down and you're expecting to be entertained. Same with theater. But with Instagram, the audience sometimes was caught off guard. They didn't expect, they hadn't signed up for this yet. So as an actor, pre-recording some footage, sort of knowing most of the story, working very creatively and very quickly on recording these things, then being posted, and her character still being very much alive throughout that whole thing in DMs and whatever else. That's something I had never experienced before, because this way of acting was so new to me. And as an actor, you usually do your job and you're part of a big machine and you're done. But in this scenario, it was, oh no, I recorded this maybe 2 weeks ago, but people are thinking that, you know, I've just done this in this moment, which is amazing. It's a really great way of storytelling. And so I got to jump into some of the DMs and start to make a relationship with these players, to then, once I had to record another scene, remember everything that I had been told and bring it to life as well, do that service, not just record everything and then sort of step back. It was more of a responsibility in such a beautiful way. So very untraditional, but very exciting. It took a lot of being on one's toes. The great thing is that I had worked with E3W before, so we have a very good way of working, very comfortable. I think that if this would have been done with somebody I'd never met before, there would be a lot of worries and sort of, as an actor, you're responsible for your own voice. And if there's a team that's responding as you, you may get nervous because, you have no control over that. But in this scenario,
and everyone thinks it's you, right? Like the
Exactly.
audience doesn't know that's not you, right?
Exactly. Just as it does on film, you play a character and people are like, oh my God, that's so-and-so. But in reality, you're just yourself. So this team, the trust is what allowed it to grow and grow and grow. And I think I loved how it became at the end much more specific. And I, as an actor, became much more confident because I knew who I was talking to now. And I knew who I was responding to, friends that I had made through the DMs. And I knew I was taken care of because this team supported the acting so much. They didn't put any responsibility on things that were out of my control. They just said, here's your scene, here's what we know, let's do this. And that was like, okay, we are fully a team and we all work in our little machines.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, to brag about Nerea, like I think the reason that we're able to buoy sort of this, because everything hinged on Jade. This character had to be relatable, likable, and you had to believe the journey they were going on. So the character had to be vulnerable, but at the same time also become scary when they're possessed, and then display this sort of range. On top of it, she's also playing Robin, Jade's twin sister, who's very much the opposite. And the way that she's able to embody all that, if that emotional core is not there, then the story is sunk because it relies purely on people caring about this individual. And what's amazing is that Nerea is an actor that I think I will always find an excuse to work with. I know everyone on the team will as well, because not only is she a skilled performer, but the idea of, especially with immersive interactive work, is the performer not only has to be able to track the character, but if you're dealing with unscripted material, if you're dealing with audience agency, and potentially helping with game mechanics, you have to know 3 or 4 different moving pieces and be able to simulate and like streamline them. And having worked like on large scale open world experiences with major IP, all the way to small bespoke individual experiences, like Nerea can do it so quickly and synthesize that level of information from character development, to complex game mechanics that you can hit in character. Like she's able to do it, and that's, I think, with actors, it's a really tough skill set.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot of cognitive load, and I've been on shows where actors were asked to handle game mechanics and they couldn't do it because they were trying to be the character, right? So you have to kind of, I imagine, kind of go in and out of the character. You have to sort of be the character and also have the kind of Google Map view of what's going on in the scene. It's really a lot. I mean, it's really impressive.
Also,
yeah.
To how the game changed week to week based on player interactions. We would tell Nerea, okay, next week, here's a preview of what's to come. But then as the first week played out, a lot would change. And, Nerea was just so willing to jump fully in and adapt with us. And so it really totally felt, like this team felt like we were constantly all gelled, all for the same goal. I remember Nerea came in, I think it was the first day of filming. We were filming she said Robin left. And like we had been talking for a week. I told her about what it was about. And she's like, who's Robin? I was like, I forgot to tell you who Robin was. Oh, welcome to the shoot. She's your twin sister. It was just like, it was that kind of, we were go, go, go. And Nerea was just
wow.
And just pick it up and run with it.
Yeah. Very cool. I wanted to ask you a question because you just mentioned that you had combining live and pre-recorded segments. This is an interesting, I'm going to call it a trick that I found really good immersive people are doing online when they realize that, oh, this doesn't all have to be live to seem live. I don't know if you guys saw Yarn by Dacha, which is also kind of a horror themed series, but they did the same thing where they had the actors were basically on a quest, and they were cell phone recording themselves going from one location to another. Turned out all of that was pre-recorded, but it felt very live. And then the scenes in each of the houses were live and had a lot of audience feedback. So that's an interesting way to do it. It means you have to perform in a very nonlinear way, right? But curious to just hear from a sort of production as well as a narrative standpoint, kind of how you integrated those pre-recorded and live components.
Well,
yeah.
We had only one really big live to pre-record moment, which was the finale. So the players had submitted their votes, and our demonologist character Gareth was about to go into the house to perform this exorcism, and he watched he watched the votes live with the players, which actually became this kind of very emotional, like pre-finale finale for the community to see each other's faces. So they got to see each other's faces doing this spell and see how many people had done it. And then in the moment, Gareth's like, this is the vote. He turns, he goes into the house, and the pre-recorded section starts, which had been really expertly filmed and edited and had like effects and everything, but it was the one they chose. So that was the big moment, but it was cool how we got to do this very, very like almost like rough and tumble, like we're playing this off a laptop. Look at you guys, right into this really beautifully produced piece of film. E3W, you want to talk more about it?
Yeah, I think that was one of those moments that really, I think that as an audience member, as a player, it was really effective to see yourself, shown the spell that you submitted, to see the character that you've been talking to respond to that in real time, and then to see this finale that was based on your decision. I think that it was a really nice way to kind of like button it up. But there were moments of interactivity. I mean, everything we did, we pre-recorded. We would do all of week one's material on like a Saturday, edit it on Sunday, and start posting it that week. But that was where I think that the DMing and the scheduling we did to make sure, like, here's a post that we don't think we need to be active immediately as it posts, but here's a post that we really should be active for this time. And so I think one that really sticks in my mind that was really effective was on week one. At one point late at night, Jade posts a video of herself saying, there was something in my doorway. I just saw something in my doorway. I feel really scared. I don't know what that was. And immediately people started DMing saying, are you okay? Are you all right? What's going on? And we were able to reply immediately saying, hey, watch right now, I'm about to post a picture of what I got. Jade was replying in the moment being like, I got a photo, you'll never believe this, check it out. And then 10 minutes later, it was posted. And so even though those were pre-scheduled posts that were taken, a week before, just having that little window of responding in the moment made it feel like it was happening right then. And that was kind of something that we tried to do throughout the entire run.
So you kind of anticipated, or you had material at the ready for the users to essentially to serve up to them when they asked for it. Does that sound like a good characterization?
Yeah, we were a week ahead generally. Like we started May with a week of material shot
I think we had 2 weeks.
Loaded.
Didn't we have 2 weeks?
2 weeks.
Like, and then
2 weeks. Yeah.
Well,
sorry.
Kind of.
Yeah, 2-ish weeks. 1.5.
The window shortened and shortened and shortened up until the finale,
until it was live.
But that way we could problem solve, we could add things, we could respond in real time to, by mid-week one, we were like identifying kind of the types of players we had and the kind of factions and how we could service them all individually. And so we were also creating new material on the fly to answer questions, to like respond to issues. But because we were 2 weeks ahead, we also had these like very produced pieces ready to go on a schedule.
We did have a couple of, we had a live stream too, where the characters were able to engage with two of the, or the audience was able to engage with two of the characters. And the challenge is when you do everything pre-scripted and it's all of us responding, you have to make sure that the actors know, and one of them was a real person. We had to make sure they were all up to speed on what was actually going on, because a character could, or an audience member could ask you something, and they had to act like they were the ones who've been responding to everything. So it's really challenging to go from like pre-scripted and not live to live, and suddenly now you have to make sure they know everything possible, and like all of us are on chat to like, in case something is unknown, we can like feed them the information. And so that was a little bit maddening doing a live event, because you just have to make sure all of it is synthesized.
So that goes back to another kind of writing related question. Eva, it sounds like you were writing also in real time as the piece was playing out. It wasn't just like a script that you gave them and then went home and let them produce it, right? You're constantly rewriting it and updating it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Now, one thing that was really interesting when you're talking about the DMs, so by week 4, we'd all split off into playing our favorite characters, and I really liked playing Robin, Jade's like kind of grouchy, intense twin in DMs, and it was great because it was the complete opposite of being a TV writer, where you write a script, it goes away, and it gets shot. Sometimes you're on set for it, but you don't change the script that much. But like as soon as we'd written versions of Robin's dialogue, but it wasn't until we saw what Nerea was doing with Robin that it made sense how to write her character, how she would respond to people in DMs, and there became like a dedicated group of players that just like to chat with Robin and have these very long, like emotional conversations with her while she was driving back to save her sister in an RV. And I only knew how to be Robin because of the way Nerea was Robin. And likewise, we were kind of creating threads of puzzles and threads of narrative to service different players. And so, yeah, we would have things scripted beforehand, but we'd be writing stuff like right before it got shot. We'd be creating puzzles. We need another puzzle for this. And in one day, we'd come up with basically the concept for the puzzle. The writers would, Tommy would design the puzzle, E3W would like actually build the puzzle, and then we'd fill it in with like the narrative around it. That we'd write the Instagram post, it was all like I said, very fluid, and a lot of it was just, even though we had the superstructure of the game and the narrative, everything was malleable, which as somebody who's does more traditional writing was like extremely exciting.
It's so interesting to me too to think about, and I'm not sure how to articulate this, but as you're talking, I'm thinking, well, so Nerea kind of alluded earlier to the fact that when you do film, it's not always you. Like it might be a CGI effect, or it might be a body double, or it might be some other thing that you see on the screen that's the actor. In this kind of a transmedia environment, because you have Nerea Jade and Robin are represented by an embodied actor, the same person, right? Because she's playing both, and then also represented across all these other media. So suddenly you have this sort of this character that themselves is a transmedia manifestation in a way. I think that's a really interesting. It's a weird way to think about acting, because I think historically acting is thought of as this very embodied thing, and so I feel like, especially theater actors tend to, I noticed this like when I started working with theater people, like anytime you get in a group of theater people, the first thing they do is like, lie down and breathe, or hold hands, stand in a circle. Like everything's about the body, where the body is relative to everybody else, and centering yourself in your body, and suddenly your character is now like spread out a bunch of other bodies. So that's really interesting to me. It's a kind of entirely new way to think about acting as a craft. Don't you think so, Nerea?
Yes. I didn't know that Robin existed, so I did not know that I was going to be playing another character. And I love about theater is that you can make these physical choices. Of course, every actor always wishes they could have done something. I guess it spans across humanity, but basically I do enjoy playing two characters. I would have liked to be able to make more physical changes, more vocal changes. That comes with the luxury of time. Oh, there we are. That was a great photo. But so I had to think of something quick to.
Is that a fake photo of you twice?
Yes, I went right into that black door, changed, came back out, and we took the same photo, and then they edited them together. But yeah, small physical changes that I felt like I could naturally pull off in the short amount of time. Of course, if you're hired for a film set, you might get the script beforehand and you might have more time to prepare. But in this sense, it was really fun to see what we could come up with on the spot. So yeah, definitely the actor brain had to split in two. And another great thing was it was shot linearly. Sometimes in film, traditionally, you would shoot the ending first. So in this scenario, I didn't have to cut between too many characters. They allowed me to fully flesh out one character and then jump into the next one.
So you had a weird thing where you were playing two characters, both of whom were distributed amongst this entire group, right?
Yes.
Well, really 3, because there was also demon possessed Jade, which was like a totally different Jade.
Of course, yeah.
And what's interesting with the writing is that even some of the elements were not fully developed because you can't write every aspect of a character because you don't know what people are going to ask. Like, there's a project I worked on with Nerea where months was spent on developing the character because anyone in the person could say something to them. In this, people could still say things, but it was still that distance with online where you could take about 30 seconds because in person you can't be like, hold on and go run off and check with the team. So with this you could. And so we'd find like someone would say like, what's your favorite movie, or like, what books did you read growing up, like any random question that we had not prepared as a team. But the idea was creating this canon on the fly by basically saying, is this there? And so once we codified that language in a chat, that would then get pasted in our like character development, so we knew this is now canon. Like, this wasn't developed, it's not affecting major story, but it helps build the character out. So the character became more developed as people asked questions that we did not have the answer to, but because of the North Star of Nerea's performance and the crafting of the writing, we were able to sort of fill in these details as we went and people asked.
It does remind me a little bit of LARPing, because I know when I've done live action role playing, a lot of times I'll have a basic character when I show up, but like I won't know, what the favorite food is or where they grew up or stuff like that. And that'll just sort of come out in the interactions with other people. It's a weird thing because it's kind of improv, but kind of something else. I'm not really sure, but it's definitely a new craft.
Yeah, and if your character is an unreliable narrator, which Jade turns out to be, you realize that some of the players are on their own Discords or their own Slacks, and they're trying to catch the character lying. So that's why if one person asks a question, especially if it's a plot thing, like where were you last week? You have to make sure the answer is consistent, or else then they think they're solving that's a clue. You want to make sure you're not telling people things they think are a clue, because that'll just send them down a rabbit hole it'll waste their time.
Have you guys played
yeah,
Her Story? Have any of you played Her Story? That's a really good kind of example of that, of a double character thing, which you sort of figure out by the inconsistencies. It's part of what makes the game interesting. It's very subtle. There was an article in Variety mid-pandemic, which was called something like "Theater makers are all now media makers." So I'd love you guys to just riff a little bit about that and what that means to you as people that have a vested interest in creating live experiences.
I'll start. So I remember when we entered the pandemic and we were planning on doing a live remounting of this experience we'd all done together, and we decided to pivot to do an Instagram online version of things. I remember I was not thrilled at first because I was like, this is not going to be, we're used to working in such intimate spaces, we're used to making these immediate connections with people, and I was kind of convinced that this would not be as effective, and so I was a little bit kind of just bummed. And it was incredible to see how from day one, because of the care that was made in the storytelling and because of the care that Nerea put into creating this character, it was mind-blowing to me. It was very eye-opening to realize how you can create those same connections if you execute it the right way online. And so that was like a huge learning for me, that I had a little bit of a like tut view of media that was online or not in person. But I mean, this was probably, we affected people in this show more than anything we've done live. So I feel like it was like a really interesting kind of awakening moment of how effective you can have something be even when you're remote.
I also,
I
want to mention that E3W has it all. They've done it all. So they have a great film that they did that then took them into immersive theater that now has taken them into this sort of a mix of a platform. So I imagine if somebody who hadn't done those previous things might have had a much harder time with figuring out the live aspect of it, remembering what it's like to have an immersive theater show with an audience member that has feelings in front of them, they could take all of that memory and place it into the Instagram format very, very effectively. So I just want to highlight on that too.
I just wanted to also add on to just what Aaron was already saying about the audience, because the shows that we would put on
as E3W before, the audience members would be like 3 audience members at a time, and having someone leave that experience and be like, that was a great time, versus you gave me something to be happy about during the bleakest time of my life, and like all of, you know, the pandemic just in general. That is insane. Like that is unlike anything we've ever done before.
I like immersive theater because it's like among many things, it taps into the feeling of that you're having a very unique and rare experience. There's like the scarcity of it, of like it's like gives you that hit you get from live theater and multiplies it because you're also having what feels like a human connection. And I also love it because it's even like horror, the stuff that E3W does live, but all immersive theater is in a way like an empathy building exercise. And so having to transfer that onto a platform, social media, which is by its very nature like empathy destroying, crushing, it kind of creates more divisions between us just by its very nature. But because of what Nerea could do, and because what we could do with the characters and the intimate communication with our players, it really did feel like we were having this very, very empathetic connection. One part of the final ritual was to save Jade. The players had to create a sigil and put it on their front door and take a picture. And we had a player who had not been outside of the house since pandemic started once, and the first time they left the house was to take the picture of the sigil. And they let Jade know how powerful this was. They wanted to save Jade that much, and it was really, really meaningful. And this person, they don't live in LA. We never would have met them otherwise, and we got to have this through the transmedia of the game, this very personal experience with this really lovely person. And things like that is just like it gave you all the pieces of immersive theater, and then plus this added thing.
Yeah, I think, we obviously didn't choose the ending, the audience did, and there was a bit of question about, like, we're in a really weird time right now. The protests, the Black Lives Matter protests had just begun as we were wrapping up, and I think a lot of us were feeling sort of hopeless in sort of a very bleak world. And I think we were very grateful that people picked the hopeful ending, because that felt like a positive way to end a story, and sort of give people a little bit of hope at the end, because the ending they chose is very positive and very affirmational, and I think this character they'd grown to care about, people connected with in a way that sort of was a bit of a surrogate. Like, if this person can go outside and feel hopeful for the future, like, maybe you can too. And the response we got from that was something unlike anything else I'd worked on. Like, I don't, I make cool games and stuff that people feel are cool and amazing, but at no point am I changing the world in a bigger way. And this message of hope that we got from people afterwards was unlike anything I'd ever seen feedback wise. Usually it's like, oh, that was cool, or like, thank you so much, that was awesome, but never like, you gave me hope. And that was just a really, really powerful thing to be part of. And I think what also is really special about this team is that everyone has a foot in multiple disciplines. And I think the fact that all of us have one foot in live experience was this sort of guiding principle, from the writing that Erica and Eva did, to, Molly's producing hat, to, E3W's immersive sort of directing skills, and then Nerea's ability to craft performance that is so bespoke to in-person experience. I think all of us gave us that emotional North Star, not to say that film and filmed media is missing, but it's the kind of thing that we knew people were craving since immersive was not active, because of COVID. And so I think that's one of the reasons we really leaned into the DMs and leaned into making people feel something for this character and feel like they get engaged, because to us that was so important, to have those empathic connections that we're just missing, that you don't usually get from filmed media.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting
to
that
Tommy really quickly, because
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Tommy, you didn't mention yourself in that whole roundabout thing that you went. And Tommy also being the person who creates those paths and is one of the best people that I've ever had in creating, because you hear the word puzzles and you think, oh, you're going to put pieces together. He creates emotional ways of putting together pieces in this, the how he makes it is just as important as the what he makes and the why he makes it. And so, you know, with all these people being together with all of that, him having an for us to be able to connective tissue and tell him, we need people to feel this. It was never make this puzzle. It was, this is what they feel. And then he would find a way of transferring that and also getting the information that they really needed in a clue and like all of that. But like, there's a huge connective piece that I just had to make sure was mentioned in that whole roundabout that he did that is very imperative to the storytelling here.
So I want to hit on two things real quick that are kind of interesting and related. One of them is Eva said something about media being unempathic. And I think it's really interesting because my experience is it can be awful and it can also be really, really intimate and moving. Like I've written about and spent a lot of time in virtual worlds and been involved with people who have very, very close bonds that they've never met in person, right? So I feel like what you guys maybe did was created a model for that, what it could be, right? And what it should be. And by using personal communication tools, right, like DMing, that are very intimate. So it's kind of like when people started doing ARGs and you get a phone call, like there's something really intimate about getting a phone call. And I think that what that does is allow the theatrical experience to become more personal and more intimate. And at its best, it can then evoke that kind of empathy that Eva was talking about. Anyway, that's my thought. Somebody else was going to say something. I don't remember who.
I was going to add that with all of this accurate emotion and where we're taking this train as a collaboration, a huge confidence platform for us was being able to know that any of the puzzles used were going to help us and were also almost foolproof in a way. You know, for me, I love playing immersive going to immersive shows and playing escape rooms, but I may not be the best kind. That's just my kind of sort of audience member. But then there are the audience members, and we can't forget, that are all about the puzzle and they need that validation. And it was so good to know that if, for example, in one shot that we did, there was a letter A behind my head, that I could focus on something else as long as the A was behind my head. And that made everybody happy because all of the gamers were like, I see it, I know what I'm doing here. And all of the people watching that are sort of in for the story are like, oh, I see what she's going through. And so both of those made it rise to the top and didn't make it just sort of a short film on Instagram. That gameplay was a huge aspect of it that thanks to Tommy, we could pull that off.
And then as far as the agency goes, a kind of two facets of that I think are really interesting. In my conversations with people that are sort of in the immersive / promenade theater space, there's a subset of people who really think of the audience as being somewhat dangerous, that giving the audience agency is potentially harmful to the performers. And I'm just wondering, like, your thoughts about that. And it sounds like you did a really good job of protecting the performers from the audience when and if that came up. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts about that.
I mean, I think it's interesting calling that dangerous. I mean, it can definitely be disruptive or challenging if you don't set expectations and standards. I mean, I think this goes back to the, ARG phenomenon of this is not a game. The principle that just like wrestling, you don't talk about it being fake. There's this universal understanding, but when you're in it, you don't talk about it being fake. You don't say this is a game. And I think we live in a day and age that was the Wild West. We live in a day with QAnon where people can't tell fact from fiction anymore. And the idea of I don't care, like
we can't do it anymore.
Yeah, I had
a really interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago with the designer of Majestic. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember Majestic.
I played it and got it a month before it shut down, so I had to race to finish it before it closed.
Yeah, so if you guys know about Majestic, it was really the first ARG, and it came out in summer of 2001. Is that right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then 9/11 happened, and they had to shut it down because they felt that it was designed to not seem like a game, and it was too close to reality at that moment, and they just pulled the plug. And
Yeah,
I think you're right, Tommy. I mean, I love ARGs, but I think we've reached a point now where we can't make games anymore that status as games is ambiguous.
yeah.
I
I
think
think
those days are over.
that was part of the accessibility for us. Like I remember with Majestic, it begins literally where you get a note that the game is canceled because the studio burned down, and then the developers message you and say the game we're making was about a conspiracy theory that's now real and now we're on the run. Which when I was a kid, my head exploded. It was amazing. But then now we live in a day and age where that is part of what drives conspiracy theories, is not being able to tell the difference. And also, we were just starting with COVID and ARGs, traffic in the mysterious and the arcane, which is fine. But for a thing about being fully safe is we didn't want anyone wandering Griffith Park or leaving their house thinking that because Jade, tugged on her ear once and looked in the mirror, they now needed to go break into a museum.
Yeah,
And so for us, it really was about protecting people. And the thing is, some people call BS because they like to be immersed fully. But I say, kids have been able to fall asleep to bedtime stories, imagining those worlds with nothing more than words. Like people can go on these journeys. You know, people can fall into a fiction really well. You don't need invisible barriers there. Like you can provide those, and that was always really important. Was acknowledging it was a game, acknowledging what days we were alive. Acknowledging in every character profile they're part of the game. Like we wanted to make it incredibly clear, both for brand new players who didn't know how this worked, and for seasoned players to not go wander off in the weeds and find something else that is part of it and try to fold that in. So that was really important to us, was making that very clear. And I think anything going forward that I work on like is about injecting that accessibility and sort of bucking that trend of ARGs are only for exclusive people that like to pretend it's real. It's like you can still pretend it's real, you just know where the fence is and what is part of it.
I think also along those same lines, we told everyone from the beginning who the team was behind it. And that's something that, like, I don't have a lot of experience in ARGs, but I remember that the few that I have done, there was always this sense of mystery of like, well, who's running this? Who's watching me do this? And there was an intrigue to that for sure, but there's also, that's really scary. And I think that, showing like, hey, we're behind it, you've seen our work before, or if not, you can read about it. Like, we're not crazy scary people, we're here because we're passionate about this. We want to give you a really great experience, so trust us, we'll trust you, let's have fun.
Eva, did you want to chime in on this? I saw you with your mic off.
Oh, just a funny fact about the game that I just love, that even with us identifying on every single website and account, this is a game, this is an in-game character, the in-game demonologist has been emailed 3 times in the last year by people trying to hire him to exorcise a demon. People who don't know about the game just found the website googling around 3 times.
Wow.
It's great.
That's wild. Yeah.
Great side
That's
hustle.
the real game for me.
Yeah, and he got rid of all those demons. He went
Yeah,
there.
they're all gone.
Fantastic.
Now every time I send an email, I'll be like, sorry, it's a game.
I think that also the other thing I was going to kind of going back to the agency question, because I think that play can be transformative, and having done a lot of LARPs and online role playing and other kinds of experiences where I really feel like they had a genuine, even though they were play, they had real meaning to me, and they were transformative in different ways. And I feel like that's part of what the agency is. You want to come away from that feeling like, and Eva sort of hit it on the head in a really nice way, that like when I do an immersive experience and then I sit down with a friend I did it with, we have a different story to tell about what we went through. And that, I love that. I love that conversation. I remember seeing Sleep No More with Stephanie, the CEO of IndieCade, and we came out and we got in our Uber and she said, there was a lot of nudity in that. And I went, wow, I missed all of it. I didn't see any nudity. And then we started comparing notes about where we went and when we went. So like I would go to a room, but something happened that she saw, but I went later. And so I saw it in a different state. So to me, that's really exciting. And I think that's what makes this work exciting, is exactly that. Like my experience is unique to me. And also my decisions have real impact. So like Dacha did a piece that we did a show about a month or 2 ago that was it was a game show in which the players program an AI who is played by an actor who basically reads off a script that was made in real time by the players. Right? It's really complicated. acting task. But I loved being the game show contestant and hearing the actor say the very phrase that I programmed into that AI character. It was such a simple thing, but I'm like, I did that. That never would have happened if I wasn't here. So I'd love to just hear, like, we have a little time left. I'd love to hear, are there some moments that you recall of player agency that you just were like, were kind of felt magical to you? And you went, yes, this is why we're doing this. This is why we want the players to be fully engaged and have agency.
For me, I remember that very early on, there was a whole period of time where Jade was posting about her nightmares. And I remember Nerea was talking to us about how amazing it was that the response was all these players started to tell her about their nightmares and their dreams. And I think that that kind of give and take,
Wow.
that vulnerability of like, let me share something with you now, it kept going throughout the weeks. And by the end, I remember there was one player, a piece of original art that they sent to Jade on DM. There was a player who poems for Jade, and unfortunately the poems came right when the demon was taking over Jade, so I remember being like, your poem is too long, and then at the end, like, Jade came back and was like, I love that, thank you so much. You know, but it was just that kind of that give and take of we're doing something for you and it's affecting them so much that they felt like they could start creating and sharing it with us. That was really a beautiful and amazing thing to see.
That's so cool. Molly, how about you? Is there something that sticks out to you as like, wow, this is magical?
Well, I don't know why. I mean, there's a bunch of moments that are like that. It is, you know, I can't help but think of our New Orleans show as well. But like when we actually, we got to, at the end of the show, they got to figure out who the witch was at the end, like, and who would lead the next coven. And they had to pick we didn't pick. We gave it, there was going to be a new coven, and they got to pick amongst themselves. And everybody, like, shouted out this same person's name, and so he got to become the leader of this coven, and the pride that he had. And then the reason why I was thinking that is because I was
a player.
It was a player, and became
oh, wow.
And so it was really great. It wasn't us; they led. But the fun thing was, is I was remembering the videos that they sent in at the end. Is he came in and he did a binder banish. I don't remember which one, but he did it in the robe as the coven leader, and there was that moment of how important that was. I mean, that was a great moment for us because we actually got everybody to participate and work together, and they did, but it was an important moment for him. And then to see him return and to see that that moment was carried on, and that those people we found out were playing together throughout this game, that they had come back together, that there had been this whole bond formed that actually stood the test of time. And in the middle of this pandemic, they were able to find a way to come back together again through this. And to see them all doing the videos just was so heartening for me, because I was like, oh, this is the point, is these people love this and they get to come back together and join forces and do this, and with their coven leader. And that got me really excited.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at when I was mentioning that thing to Eva about the bonds, because at least, I mean, I wrote a book called Communities of Play, which is all about this, about how the kinds of bonds that can be formed through play. And that's so cool that that bond then persisted into your next game. Yeah. Eva, anything stick out to you, like where you went, wow?
Yeah. Oh, for me it was so there were the true crime story, this kind of unknown now murderer named William Edward Hickman from the 1920s. He was the kind of the centerpiece of one of the threads, and he was where the demon came from that was possessing Jade. So I had been just kind of obsessed with this story for a couple years, and I'd read a couple books about it, so I was kind of the group expert on the murder. But about like 5 days into the game, the hardcore gamers became much better experts on it. As soon as they learned what the story was, they had created a dossier of so much more information than I had ever been able to find in my life about it, that then we were able to like look at, refer to, and use to create puzzles. And so it was basically one of the players told me at the end, like, you created like more Hickman experts than there ever have been on the planet, like super experts in this one weird guy's murder. And so that was delightful. That made me so happy that we had the players became the researchers, and then we could then use that to reward them.
I love that kind of research as a game mechanic. and I've seen that work really well, and I've used it in my own games. But also, I really like that your process was collaborative enough that you could then integrate their research and their art as well, or whatever thing that they brought to the table becomes actually part of the piece. It's really exciting.
Yeah, that was really
Like, yeah,
that
go
was
ahead.
really important. That was really important to us, I think, in ways they did realized and then didn't realize. Because again, the questions they would ask, it would be like looking at a piece of art where you're like, oh, from this angle it's fully formed, but then you walk on the side and there's pieces missing on the side, and their questions would help us fill in characters. So again, it's I think why if this would have been very different had we filmed it all in advance and just let it run its course. But the fact that it evolved because of their involvement in ways they didn't know, to me is really special. Like we would lurk on some of the forums where the people were solving, and at times they'd pick up on stuff that we had deliberately planted. Other times they were picking up on things we had not deliberately planted, and I'm like, damn, that's a really good idea. Now it's canon. Like, so just the number of things that they were looking at in the same way that you might analyze literature, the same way you might analyze a really good film, and look at threads and themes and subtle gestures. That was important to us because we didn't want them to, again, go down rabbit holes and solve things that weren't intended to be solved. So being very explicit about like these are the paths to follow, but really the details they noticed. And some people did try to solve things that weren't intended, and we tried to make sure we, nix those in story ways. But really the fact that, yeah, people found so many subtle details in things that we didn't even intend to place, maybe subconsciously, but that we were able to fold back in. And so
So a highlight for you that you remember going, yes, this is a cool agency outcome.
so it really was there was a true crime aspect. Essentially in the story, this demon essentially is follows through a pattern of behavior where it would possess someone. That person would commit a violent crime and then die by like execution. That was sort of the pattern this demon thrived on. And so in tracing the history, we wanted to use real true crime cases that started with, Hickman in the 20s and then would go
Oh,
back.
so the demon, you had real murderers that demon had ostensibly possessed. Oh, very nice.
And so it was really about sort of a logic puzzle of us of digging through and finding a murderer that would logistically have been near where the previous person had been and been executed. And then the idea that this creature was now in Jade. And so it was really about layering a lot of story details, but implying that the logical end of Jade would be her murdering someone and then getting executed. That's what the demon wants. And so it was knowing this outcome and them wanting to be protective of her once they figured out what it wanted. But what was amazing is them doing research into these true crime stories. So it was beyond Hickman, it was other cases. And it was really fascinating sort of seeing the level of detail that they would dig up. So at the end of the game, in the final week, there was a track about digging deeper into artifacts left behind by these different murderers. And a lot of the information they had dug up, I reused because I knew that they knew this information. And it would feel like they would feel smart that they, uncovered
Right.
something. In reality, the tail was wagging the dog a little bit because they had done some research for me. And I'm like, if I'm going to use information in a puzzle, I want it to be stuff they already know. So that was a really
Right.
interesting, yeah. So I was just really impressed again the level of impact that the research they did had on the game, so they didn't feel it was useless information. They're like, oh no, this came back.
Yeah,
And then
that specifically when they found this crossword puzzle in a really old paper and posted it, and Tommy's like, "Well, I get to make a crossword puzzle.
Yeah,
Like we get to reuse
yeah,
this perfect crossword puzzle
that's
yeah,
that they'll
it's crazy.
recognize
great.
because it had a bird around it."
Yeah, Hickman had they found in his apartment he had done a puzzle from the Kansas City Star, and so there was a small snippet of it. So I'll share, but my let's see, I'll find it. But yeah, that was a really interesting piece to do
So the
because
players found it,
well,
and then
they saw it in a screenshot of like from one of the books, and then I had to go through. Thankfully, the biggest owner of newspaper archives is Ancestry.com, and so I got a trial subscription, and I dug through and found that that was actually a syndicated crossword in 5 or 6 newspapers. So I went to the day and found all the major dailies that had it, and I found the biggest like scan of it, and I copied it, and then we made a version of it, and then I made a brand new crossword from it.
Oh, that is amazing. What a great story. I mean, you really were truly collaborating with the players. That is so cool. I love that.
So yeah, they got a crossword, but then they knew the provenance of the thing. And so the premise was that someone had submitted the puzzle to the editor of the LA Times and it got rejected. So that was the premise. It was a modern crossword puzzle inspired by this, and it obviously had a lot of interesting clues in it.
Oh, very cool. So,
I think one of the clues was about one of the players too. We even like made it super specific.
oh, very cool. So, I also want to hear from Nerea and also Natalie. So you guys can go and, oh, look at that. So you took that original crossword puzzle in the bird and then you designed a new crossword puzzle?
Yeah, it was the bird form was from the original PDF of the newspaper, and then the boxes we
Oh
adjusted
my
slightly.
God.
And what's crazy is that back when crosswords existed back in the 20s, they hand wrote the numbers. So had to rewrite the numbers, and so it was a long
Oh,
process.
wow, that is so cool.
And this is a custom crossword that I had to design, which crosswords are really damn hard to make.
They're so hard. Oh my God, I'm really impressed. And how long did it take you to do that?
Oh my God, that was an evening activity where thankfully my partner is a really talented Photoshop artist who was able to help me get it done and make it look good as I was writing everything clue-wise. And so it took forever because there were certain spots where I'm like, I knew which words I wanted to include. So those were like sort of the anchors, and then I just built around it, but it took forever.
So I want to make sure we get to everyone. I'm going to ask Natalie to go next, and then we'll have Nerea last.
Yeah, for me, it was Gareth, the character of Gareth. He wasn't originally going to be as big of a character. Gareth was played by Eric Hoff, the writer that is not here today. So getting to work with him in that way, with him being an actor, was amazing. But then also that character got to bring a lot of kind of just a comedic, like lighter than the rest of what was going on the show at that time. And the audience loved him. So we got to find ways to incorporate him through the rest of the game, which was really fun. Everyone wanted to know about his partners. Everyone wanted to know just everything about Gareth. So it was really fun getting to incorporate him more in because Eric was amazing in that.
It was so funny.
It was so funny.
What was his character exactly?
He was the demonologist. Yeah. And so
he was the one that got the request later.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And I mean, people want to know, like, they want a spin-off show, a spin-off game about him and his partners and his life. I mean, he blossomed into something way bigger than we expected. There he is. He's a star.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing this picture before. It's so funny. He looks really eccentric and wonderful.
Mm-hmm. I did a movie recently, and I was very, very excited when I got to have guest appearances by Jade and Gareth in a small scene in the movie, and it literally was one of the happiest days of my life. So
that's so cool.
Thank you so much for coming and doing that. It was so great. But these two, they have to have their own film or series or immersive or something, because I just need to know what happens next.
So cool. I'm sad that I didn't get to play this game. That sounded so much fun. So Nerea, what's your highlight?
Highlights definitely for the kind of player I am was the comedy, just as Natalie said. It allowed for all spectrums of this world. It wasn't all doom and gloom. And also the morality of the players. I was so pleasantly surprised at how everyone would conduct themselves, like we say, it's the wild, wild west, and a lot of terminology like ghosting and sort of sliding into your DMs and all these kinds of things are very real in the game as well. So I remember hearing that one of the Discords had found sort of my information, my real information, and I got a little bit nervous because I thought maybe they might slip into thinking that that's part of the game and not so meta that it is me in real life and something. But no, I think they all talk themselves away from that subject because they're like, no, remember that this is a game. And them making those moral choices made me feel really happy and safe as an actor on this wild platform. And other people would reach out and go, I know I'm playing this game right now. Just want to say you're doing such a great job. Want to follow you as an actor. So that to me was like, oh, you can compartmentalize who I really am. And I've stayed friends with these people, and we've even like have a little thrift shop. They've bought some things from my thrift shop, so it's really nice to end up handwritten letters, not at all as Jade, just as myself. So happy with humanity.
That's a really, I mean, that's a great answer also to the earlier question I had about safety for actors, because I think that that is, you know, people do docs and do all kinds of weird shit. And it's really nice that you came away with an experience where you felt that the audience respected and was, you know, had a sense of care for you as a person as well as an artist. So that's really cool. Great. Well, we're at 4:20. Ha ha ha. Very funny. I'm wondering if does anyone have any final? Oh, here's my last question. Actually, I actually have a last question. Um, I'd love to hear just a little bit, you know, briefly from how do you think this experience of creating this ARG will change your aesthetic for live in-person performances? Is there anything that you took away when you went, oh, I think I'm going to approach live things differently now? So maybe we can just go around and people can just speak up when they're ready.
I know that the next live thing I do, I would love to have an online component that people can participate, even if they don't live in LA, even if they're not on boots on the ground, even if they live in Belarus or Germany, that they can at least touch the kind of art we're doing. And I never thought that way before, but I do now.
Yeah, that was something we talked about at the break. If I can just punctuate that it's something a lot of people that I've talked to doing online theater said the greatest thing about the pandemic was that they suddenly had a bigger audience, a diverse audience, an audience from around the world, a global audience. So it'll be interesting to see how we can weave that back in to location specific work. Aaron, go ahead, sorry.
No, yeah, I think that for E3W, all of the shows that we've done live in the past have been very on the rails. They're very intimate, very immersive, but the audience doesn't have a lot of agency. And we've had a lot of success with them, and we feel really passionate about what we do, but I think that we've always been afraid to give too much agency to to our audience, because we have such a specific story we want to tell, and we want to make sure we tell it the best way we can. And this was an experience that showed that we can still tell the story we want to tell and tell it with integrity and let that agency exist. And so I'm just very excited about our next live performance and seeing ways that we can pull that in. That's something that we were afraid of in the past, and now I'm not afraid anymore because it was a lot of fun.
Cool.
For me, I think, the big thing I think for me is really emphasizing accessibility and seeing how we wanted to make people who had never done ARGs comfortable in the space. And I think it's just a comfort level. It's two things. It's building trust with your audience in that you need to establish what is okay for them to do, have warnings in world, and then if they ever set those, have warnings out of world, and then be willing to execute on, removing from the room or blocking or banning. But on top of that, it's the other way around, is as a designer, making sure they can trust you. If there are details or things that you're encouraging them to dig and find, you need to make sure you are at the top of your game and really filling it with detail that they're going to want to find and that pays off. So I think for me, it's the detail work and making sure everything is really cleanly aligned and accessible to as many audience types as possible. So those are the big things that I look back at previous work I had done and realize I had a bit of a blind spot for audiences that weren't as, familiar with material and how this material could be overwhelming or, confusing at first. So it's really approaching it from that lens of making it for both veterans and the supporters of the community and the diehards, but also for new people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the story should always dictate the platform and not the other way around. And so, but at the same time, being aware of the platform and sometimes how to tell the story, you can go both ways a little bit with it. But I mean, I don't know. I started with film, then I went into live stuff, then back to film, then into immersive. And honestly, the only thing that I can say is the more people that you can be aware of that you're trying to reach, and the more accessible you can make your content, the better it is for everybody. And then being aware that sometimes that is part of the creative, making your work accessible and how to integrate that properly. I would love to do, I was looking at a venue was talking about doing live shows, but how to integrate, they've had these amazing Zoom trivia experiences and how to integrate those, because there's all these people all over the world that now get to participate. And so as long as the story is always at the front, and then you can serve that, I think it's going to be very cool to see how we can integrate and how we can continue to weave that in. But yeah, and what everybody else said, because I already said everything very well.
From an actor's perspective, technology was always very alienating from the craft. I had put them in separate categories, as well as social media seemed to be a place for popularity, and the craft was meant for a place of respect. But now we've seen that they have all melded together, and you can make work that is respectable on social media and use that algorithm, let's say the likes and whatever else, and still be able to do good work. And also for theater and film, you know, not so scared of everyone silence your phones, put your phones away, you're in an experience now. As an actor, not seeing a phone and thinking that's a bad sign, more of how can we use that to help them get the experience that they want if we can integrate that.
Very cool. I feel like we're missing something. Did everybody get to say their great? You guys are fantastic. What a fun conversation. Like, it's funny with this show because I always feel very selfish because it's mainly just conversations I want to have with people whose work I admire. And if people show up and want to watch, fantastic. But I'm just really happy because this is the conversation that I wanted to have with you guys. So thank you so much. And thank you for submitting your work to IndieCade and exposing our community to the work that you're doing, because I think it's going to be very influential in the long haul, especially as sort of the ARG techniques and the live theater techniques start to be in conversation with each other. We're going to get some really interesting new work, I think, coming down the pike. So thanks so much for being on the show. And I look forward to seeing you guys soon, either in person or in a mediated context. And keep up the good work. And I'll look forward to your next projects.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.